Native American pitted stones, cupping stones, nutting stones, or amble stones, all synonymous with one another, are intriguing artifacts that have fascinated archaeologists and historians for decades. These stones are characterized by their distinct, usually shallow depression pits, which are believed to have served various functional and ultimately cultural purposes in indigenous communities. This video explores the nature of pitted stones, of which with all its synonyms we will describe as such for the rest of this video. The pitted stone. What are pitted stones? Pitted stones are stones or rocks featuring those depressions or pits created by the indigenous peoples through a process of pecking, grinding, or other forms of abrasion. These depressions vary in size and shape, and the stones themselves can range from small handheld pieces to larger boulders. The use of pitted stones by Native Americans dates back thousands of years. Archaeological evidence suggests that these stones were employed from the early Archaic period in roughly 8000 BC through to the Historic period. The exact timeline can vary depending on the region, as different Native American cultures used and modified these tools according to their needs and available resources. Now, like we said in the beginning, the use case of these stones has really baffled archaeologists and historians alike. But the most common theories of pitted stone use cases are food processing. One of the primary uses of pitted stones was probably for food processing. The depressions were used for grinding seeds, nuts, and other plant materials. The stones often functioned similarly to mortar and pestle sets, helping to break down foodstuffs into finer, more digestible forms. Use case number 2, fire starting. Among the various uses for Native American pitted stones, one intriguing possibility is their role in fire-starting techniques. Although this use is less commonly discussed compared to their applications in food processing or perhaps ceremonial contexts, the idea that pitted stones might have been employed to create fire is definitely worth exploring. I like to think that there may have been some sort of fire storage element at play, as they might have used the pits to store embers for later use in their day-to-day life, as starting a fire over and over again was probably annoying as hell. I like to imagine use cases as well, like sweat lodges or traveling from, say, the flatland camp down to the local creek. Now, while on the topic of storage, it's also likely that they were using these to store liquids or pigments from the various paints that they would use to paint themselves for hunts. Pitted stones could have also had various applications in woodworking in particular, such as polishing and other carving techniques. I've even heard a theory regarding pitted stones that some of these stones could have been used as some sort of navigational aid. The pits may have been used to create alignment points for astronomical observations, or perhaps to mark trails in important locations. Whatever the use case for these ancient tools, the use case is probably different depending on what it was needed for at the time. These are realistically best described as ancient man's equivalent of modern man's workbench. At least we think, or at least I think. Now let me know what you think in the comments of this video, and if you enjoyed and love Native American stuff, including documentaries, artifact hunting, site visits, or videos like these, then please subscribe as well, because I think you'll love my channel. It's all we do here at the Doogies Earthworks YouTube channel. So make sure to hit that subscribe once again and hit that like, and thank you for watching. I love you. Alright, so I wanted to take the time here to just show you some real-world examples of how we could possibly identify some of these different use cases. I have a couple of pitted stones here showing off possibly a use case of food processing. I have one that has a use case of possibly fire starting. And then the most interesting one I thought was the navigation aspect, using it to identify trails or astronomical phenomenon, or not phenomenon necessarily, but navigational purposes, navigating the stars and whatnot. So I have one for potentially that use case as well. So let's go ahead and show you guys these different examples. We'll go ahead and start with the fire starting aspect because I think it's the most obvious, for lack of better words. And then we'll do the food processing, and then we'll show you the navigation at the end. So let's go ahead and pull this around. So this particular stone is relatively small. It's fairly small, especially compared to the other two here. But the way that I identified this as being used as some sort of fire starting method is if you compare it to these ones, which I'll let you assume which is which navigation wise and food processing wise, but you can see that the cupping or the divot is a lot different, right? This one's very circular. This one is deformed in a way. But if you take a look at this one, you can see the rotary marks to where it looks like they were trying to spindle something. And to me, that is indicative of some sort of fire starting process. I mean, you can really see it. The divot right there. It looks like they were rotating something in there, right? And another interesting aspect, you can see it on this one as well. This one does not have one, but you can see these little plucks right here. That's how they start the hole. They would pluck it out with another hard stone to get it started to make a hole. So you can see where they started it right there, and they decided that that wasn't a great spot because of the angle. So they decided to put it right here. But I thought that was very indicative of some sort of fire starting process, and I think many would agree with that, especially when you compare it to other versions of it. And I have a few others up here as well. But yeah, so that is the fire starting process, or the fire starting example. I thought it was interesting that the stone was super small. It does look like that it fragmented, so this is probably a fragment, or most certainly we can assume a fragment of a bigger stone. And that you will find them a lot like this in smaller fragments. They get broken up over the years. But moving on to the food processing one, and if you guessed that right, good job. So like I said before, you can see where they plucked out a hole to try and start a hole, and they decided the angle wasn't good. Now the reason that I believe this is indicative of food processing is just look at the hole. It looks like it looks like the way they worked it, they were pestling something, probably some sort of shell. In the area that I found these in, there is a lot of shells, so shellfish and whatnot. But let me show you, let me pull out a little stone tool here out of my bag. Okay, so here we are. We got our little pestle tool, just to show you an example. Now this isn't an actual tool, I don't believe that they were using, but it does have interesting hand marks kind of divoted into it, so you never know. It was found in the same area. But aside from the point, it's a perfect example. It's a perfect stone to show you what they would have done with this. If they had some sort of shell in here, this would have basically been their workstation. They would have sat here and grounded it up. Or possibly something for pigment. They would have been grinding some pigment or something. You never know. But that was basically the action that was used to create this divot. And you can, like I said, if you compare it to that, fire starting, pestling, right? So, thought that was pretty interesting. And now for the navigation rock. And I thought this was the most interesting use case, potentially, and I'm sure many of you do as well. But as you can tell, this hole is in a very particular spot of this rock, almost like it's indicating some sort of direction, right? That's the first indicator. The other indicator is the fact that it's nearly a perfect circle, a very intentional spot. And you can see here how it's intentionally put in this right-hand corner up here. And another thing you notice comparatively to this hole right here, how this one's not a perfect circle. This one is a perfect circle, and it's a perfect circle because there is no room for interpretation as to where this would potentially be pointing in terms of navigation. So there is no second guessing whether or not this is pointing in a certain direction, right? That's the other giveaway. So you can imagine this rock. It's a very big rock as well, which is another aspect, which I believe it was actually bigger at one point. It looks like it's fragmented a little bit. So this was a very, very big rock. If they had it planted in a certain direction, say the hunting trail was this way. You have two different directions, right? Say this was a tree. This corner is a tree. Two different directions. Well, it's very indicative of where this is pointing to. If you have two different ways. So that is another use case or another real life example of potential use case of a cupping stone, pitted stone. I thought that was the most interesting scenario, the navigation. So if you enjoyed, thank you. Please come again.